help is when I'm ocean waves.
Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have recent Marine Corps Marathon winner Bonnie Axman Keating, who I didn't even know that a Robinson person won the marathon. I know we had a Robinson coach that was announcing the marathon, and I had posted on social media that he was doing this, and finally someone messaged me. I forgot who it was, but a friend of Bonnie, and said, "By the way, a Robinson person won the event." But anyway, Bonnie, great to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah. So apparently, Coach Brian Hazard. He's the wrestling coach, has won so many state champions. Who was announcing? So how do you know Coach Brian?
I knew him. He was my PE teacher, so it was awesome to hear. I didn't realize it was him announcing until another friend from high school said, Brian Hazard was announcing, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. Small world, right?
Yeah, and apparently quite a few Robinson people have done well at the event. I mean, I guess something about Robinson. We train our athletes to go the distance.
Right. Last year when I ran the race, Brian Dunham, I'm sorry. He ran cross country with me when I was in high school, and he runs for the Air Force. So he was there last year as well.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Well, let me give your quick bio for folks who may have forgotten briefly who you are. You went to Robinson class of 2003.
Yes.
I was class of 84, and you were born in 85, which we won't talk much about. Yeah, I know you played soccer and ran cross country at Robinson. Your senior year, you didn't play soccer, and I believe you ran track instead of soccer. You went to Frostburg State, and you ran cross country. You were 21st in the NCAA Division III cross country. So you had a good career there. Then you ended up transferring to San Diego State that you transferred to? Yes. And unfortunately, they were focused more on middle distance, and you were more in the long distance. So it wasn't the perfect match, but you ended up staying in Southern California. Took some time off running, and but I guess you got the bug, and you started running some marathons. You got your time under 3 hours, and then you just kept improving. And here you are today. You've won the Orange County Marathon 3 times, I believe. You've won the Long Beach Marathon at least a couple times, I believe, right? You finished 5th in the Marine Corps at one point. Did I get that wrong, Bonnie?
No, I just run Long Beach one time.
What's that? Okay. Oh, come on. But you won the Missoula Marathon, 20th in Chicago, which is, I think, a major marathon in 2018. You've won the Carlsbad, beautiful suburb of San Diego. And also, you also train, you're a HIT instructor for the Marine Corps. So running is something you do as a hobby and an avocation, and something that you love. So, Bonnie, did I get most of that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So for the Marine Corps, I kind of have a couple jobs. I'm a strength and conditioning coach, and then I help with the programming of their functional fitness. I help them out with running mechanics. Also, the base I work on is the recruit training base here at San Diego. I'm help with the running mechanics for recruits as well, and then strength and conditioning programming all around. And then I manage a fitness center as well. So kind of get both sides of facility maintenance and then programming.
Yeah. Are you a civil servant? Or are you a contractor to the?
I'm a federal employee.
Oh, okay, you're an employee. Okay, great. So, well, my first question, and I don't know too much about marathons. Obviously, the Marine Corps Marathon is a big event for folks that live in DC. Where does the Marine Corps Marathon, where does it rank amongst the marathons around the country? I mean, where exactly is the Marine Marathon in relation to other marathons?
So it's definitely a challenging course. A lot of times runners want to pick courses that they can qualify for larger events. And so, I mean, Boston Marathon's notorious for being challenging as well, but most people are qualifying for that race. So a lot of times I want to find flat races. This one is not it. And the weather is always different, which plays a huge role. Last year when I ran it, the weather was perfect for racing. In 2019, when I ran it, it was pouring rain. So that was not a fun day. But I would say personally, you know, I run Chicago, which is one of the bigger races I've done. I've done California International, which is the West Coast big marathon. And this one is just a happy race. Like everybody out there is cheering you on. It's not about time. It's about just getting out there, and the Marines are out there supporting you. I think it's just more of a community, you know, city event where you're just happy to be there no matter how you're doing.
Yeah.
Where I think for me, I guess I'm biased because I'm from that area. So I guess everyone has maybe a different, you know, idea of what that marathon means to them.
Mm-hmm. Will pros run the Marine Corps Marathon, or will they not run?
I think on this, every so often we get international pro athletes. Like I said, because of the timing of it, it's right before New York Marathon and right after Chicago, which are big races that pull elites from. I feel like maybe if it was at a different time of year, it might have more elites in it. But because those two big races alone are so close to it, I think that's maybe the only reason why not as many elite athletes are in that race. But you know, given the day, it doesn't matter. You know, everyone can be a surprise moving up, running a good time. But like I said, it's notoriously known to be more challenging. So that's the reason.
Is it the biggest moment of your career? I mean, is winning the Marine Corps bigger than winning the Orange County Marathon or the Long Beach Marathon?
I think it's pretty similar to when I ran my PR in Chicago. It was a life goal for me to hit that time. But I feel like for example, mile 11, I don't know if you're familiar with that, where that's at. It's at the Kennedy Center, the steps.
Sure.
Looking over. And I distinctly remember this time running through there. And, you know, at this point, I was in second for the marathon, but it looked like I was in fourth because the 50Kers were out in front. And those crowds went crazy when I ran by. I've never heard a crowd that loud. And that may have been, I got the chills. And, you know, you kind of have to control yourself a little bit because you get that adrenaline rush where you want to speed up and then you're going to pay for it later because it's still way too early in the race. And I just distinctly thinking to myself, this is the coolest moment of my running career because, you know, I've been in, you know, been running faster in bigger races and never felt that feeling. And it was just amazing because of the amount of strangers out there. I don't know them, you know, out there just cheering on not me, but everybody. And it was just so loud. It was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you mentioned the 50 miler out there as well. Is it confusing because on the course you have men running the marathon, females run a marathon, and you have other events? I mean, do you know where you are? Obviously, you're one of the top.
I had no idea. I had people yelling at me as I was running. You're in fifth, you're in fourth, you're first, you're second. I have no idea, but that's happened to me in the past. So I had a general idea that I was, you know, top 3 or 4, but I really didn't know. I just kind of, you know, from past experience, just was like, run your race, stay within yourself. The race is too long to do anything crazy all of a sudden because you're trying to get into second or first. You just have to stay within your conditioning and your experience. And a lot of times marathons, the race doesn't really start until 4 or 5 miles left to go. You know, you can get to mile 22 on pace and all of a sudden fall off and then you don't hit your PR. And that's a long time to be on pace than not to be. So I think the marathon racing, it really humbles you because it teaches you things that you can't ever really experience unless you're in that situation, you know?
Yeah. Now, are all major marathons combined fields, male, female? I know like the Olympic trials that which you did, I think that was all female field, but generally are the major marathons always a combined field?
So no, like they'll have staggered starts.
Mm.
So like for the pros, elites for like Boston and New York, they'll have separate because it's rules that they have because they don't want anyone saying that they're that some of the female runners are using some of the male runners to run faster. But in the general population of those bigger races, yes, it's combined. But it just depends on the race. So yeah.
I have a good friend that does Grand Fondos, and it's a combined cycling race. And the strategy for the women is to find some men who are not trying to win the men's event and just draft with them and to get away. Yeah, so it's kind of cool, the strategy that's involved. Now, is the Marine Corps Marathon an important stepping stone? So if you win the Marine Corps Marathon, does it mean something in terms of like sponsorships, or can it help you with other events, or however it works in running?
That qualifying time, so it really comes down to time. You use it as a time to get into a more competitive race, put it on your resume if you're trying to get sponsorship. So I mean, it's always an advantage to put it maybe on a resume to submit for something that you're either trying to be sponsored for, or a competitive race to get into. It just means a lot to me because I've been working for the Marine Corps since 2007. I knew some of those Marines working out on the course. I knew some of the Marines participating. I knew some of the Marines at the start line. So it was just something that was really cool to just be a part of. And then to win it, it was just really exciting, and from that standpoint. Yeah. I think for me, that means more to me than necessarily getting a sponsorship, because you have the history with a lot of the people within that organization.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the weather, and it was an unseasonably hot day. I mean, this day in August would have been perfect, but this time of year, well, it was humid, but this time of year, it's a little bit different because it felt hot, at least to me. You live in Southern California, so you can always go inland and train in heat, right? Is it so? Were you prepared for a hot day, or was it a surprise to you?
So it was, and the dry heat was what I've been exposed to, which it can get hot, but it's you dehydrate at a very slow rate compared to humidity. So I knew right away from the start that the humidity was going to be a factor because I just felt off. It felt like you were doing more work from the go. So you have to adjust your splits early. Otherwise, you're going to pay for it. You try to stay with your hydration, but you also have to go to what your body's adapted to recently, I would say in the last 4 to 8 weeks. Mine's been dry heat. I did some training up in Arizona altitude, not very high, but it's still a dry heat. It doesn't compare to humidity. I was talking to other runners who've been from this area and it hasn't been like this. So even they haven't been adapted to it, even though they're from that area, because it hadn't been that warm. So it's really what you've exposed your body to recently, so it can adapt. So it's not like like all of a sudden shocker to the system. And you just have to be experienced running in humidity. Like people from Florida probably didn't have an issue, or the South right now is still warmer, probably adapted to it, probably didn't notice. I know I was asking the runners around me when we finished, hey, how did you feel? And they had similar feeling. Oh, I didn't have a good day, didn't have the time I wanted. The humidity was a factor. Because sometimes you just don't know if you're having an off day, but then when I was talking to other runners, they had, similar experience. But, your body temperature is elevated at higher humidity and heat, and that's going to dehydrate you faster. That's going to make your work feel harder sooner. Your heart rate's going to go up faster sooner. So, I mean, you're just putting your body under more stress that way. Yeah.
So I used to do bicycle racing many years ago, and there is a strategy when you're under pressure, when you're kind of suffering. Oftentimes that's a time to attack, because the way it works in cycling, if you're feeling that way, most often other people are feeling the same way around you. And usually if you're able to get a gap, you kind of get adrenaline from that, and it kind of builds off that. Do you have that kind of psychological type of feeling in running, where it's hot, you're feeling it, but in your mind you're like, well, it's hot for everybody else, so I just gotta kind of power through this?
I think those type of situations really come down to experience, because you're like, oh, I've been in this situation before. I know how to handle it. You have to go on perceived effort, because if you go on, oh, what my split should be, you're just, you may be able to hold them for the first 10, but that race obviously has another 16 miles to go where it could just be, a struggle, which I've been there in the past. So I think a lot of that comes down to experience. I know cycling's a lot different than running. And that because you can move at such faster speeds. The people around you really help hold your pace. I do a lot of distance running solo. So learning how to pace and learning how to work at a work rate by yourself sometimes is more challenging, because just having that one person out there to catch can really just, change up your training. But it's not going to be a reason why I don't train or not still compete using that as a reason. So I think it just comes down to your experience. Well, you know how to be alone, to run and hold your pace. And though it's always helpful when people are around you, but oh, it's hot, it's humid today. Use your experiences from the past and don't just go for it and let your energy take over. And I think that's really what gets a lot of people in this race specifically, because it's so many people and it's such a celebration that they don't necessarily go out the pace they should go at. They go at what their adrenaline takes them out at. Luckily enough for me, the first 2 miles, it's a hill climb and I'm like not trying to sprint that. So I just took it out really conservatively, and I took it out how I was feeling. And that's the other thing with distance running. I don't know if you get familiar with cycling, but there's different points in the race where you feel good, then you feel bad, then you feel good, then you feel bad. So if you get stuck in your feelings for too long, you can kind of want to quit if you're feeling so awful, and you just have to have hope, oh, you'll get a second win. And that's what I kept telling myself when I could feel myself kind of change pace a little bit, get my rhythm back. Oh, you're getting a second win. Oh, you're getting a second one, even though I really probably wasn't. At least psychologically, you're staying positive in the moment, which is really hard to do when you're uncomfortable.
Yeah. At what point did you think, I can win this race? At what point did it occur to you that this could be your day?
Honestly, I know I passed the first place woman at the time. It was like mile 13, 14, but I still wasn't sure what place I was in. But I kind of it was either second or first. And then it was probably 3 miles to go when more of the crowd was like, you're in the lead. And I had more confidence in them because they were near the finish.
Yeah.
So, but I was not feeling good at 3 to go. It was not pretty. I would tell you that. And that last half mile uphill wasn't pretty either. So I knew there was a large enough gap because around mile 3 to go, there's a switchback. So you can see there's a turnaround. So you can see who's close to you.
Oh yeah.
So I had a feeling that I could hold on to it. But again, there's been marathons where I've seen people, really doing well. And then all of a sudden the last 2 miles they're walking,
Mm-hmm.
I've never had that experience, but you never know, that could always be a factor. So you just kind of stay humble, keep working, stay focused, and really just kind of keep those thoughts in your head, and just go for it, do what you can. But at that point in that race, but 2 to go, it was, I was suffering a good deal. I would probably say this is the top 3 races that I've ever done where I felt like this is hard, because I don't know, maybe I had been sick about a month ago. My volume didn't get as high. I've been dealing with a nagging hamstring injury. So I went into this race not really knowing the outcome, because I didn't do as much volume as I normally did. So, that messes with your confidence a little bit. So I feel like that was probably a factor for the last 3 on how I felt. Mm-hmm. But the crowd was still very encouraging and say, you look strong. The crowd was really awesome that day, saying really positive things. So that's always helpful.
Yeah. But those gaps are hard to close though. So even though you're feeling terrible, the runner behind you doesn't know that. And all they know is that they're tired too. And you've beaten them up until that point. So I think psychologically, aren't those gaps hard to close, even if, you're tiring pretty badly up front?
Right. Also, too, you have your past experiences that maybe were not great or bad. So you just assume it's going to go that way. So, I mean, distance running is so mental to stay positive. Okay, maybe it's not going to happen like it did last time. That's always a possibility. You know that can happen. Here's what you need to do. Learn from that experience. I know at that point, I was a lot of, you get camaraderie suffering with people around you. And so the men that were around me at the time, we were all encouraging each other because I know we were all feeling the same because we would all, one of us would back off, then we'd speed back up, somebody else would drop back, then we'd speed up, and try to encourage each other. So regardless of who it is out there, male or female, I think when you get to a certain point of discomfort, you just try to help each other because it helps you in the end. I think if you're telling, you're hurting and you're encouraging somebody, I feel like sometimes that even helps you try to get through it as well.
Yeah. What was the feeling after you crossed the finish line? I mean, were you physically able to enjoy it, or were you so drained it took you a while to
I
really
was able
enjoy
to,
it?
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
I
no, go
was
ahead.
able to enjoy it, but all eyes are on the finish, right? And it's
Mhm.
straight uphill after a 2 to 3 mile climb already. And so I just didn't feel strong coming through the finish because I wasn't moving very fast up that hill. I know I wasn't. So that, in my mind was, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was trying, but legs were smoked, dehydrated by that point. But I mean, all the Marines on that straightaway just encouraging you coming up that hill was awesome, which was another factor. I was like, oh, I really wish I had a kick right now, but I don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I recovered rather quick. And I think, you get another adrenaline rush after you realize, I finished, I won, and people congratulating you. And that's really awesome, because you have to take it in and appreciate it because you don't know if that'll ever happen again or how long it'll be, and so you can't take it for granted, just really enjoy the experience.
Yeah. Hey, what's been the reaction? I mean, you heard from Nova Legends, but what's been the reaction? Have you heard from a lot of old friends? And it must have been.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
a lot of friends that I ran cross country with in high schools, friends have reached out, congratulating me, supporting me. So that was always awesome to hear from them. Some friends from college that reached out that are still in the area. The community support, the Marine Corps support as well. A lot of Marine friends that reached out to me. So it was really awesome to, know that you have that support. Because, life takes over, work takes over, other things in life take over. So sometimes you lose those connections. And then, to hear from people you haven't heard from a long time, knowing that they still support you, even though you're not winning all the time, or, a lot of people have supported me through a lot of, downtimes as well. Running isn't always linear,
Yeah.
never usually is.
Yeah.
So anytime that you can do something good, you really just have to enjoy that experience.
Yeah. Well, I believe there's no purse money for the Marine Corps, but is this a good opportunity for you to get sponsorship opportunities?
I feel like a lot of sponsorship has changed a lot with social media.
Mm.
Um, I think if I put together, add this to my resume and reach out, it could be helpful. A lot of times, has to do with, tagging companies, wearing products, this, that, and the other. And so sponsorship has changed a lot. But again, using it more for, let me put it on a resume, experience. I mean, the race last weekend, each race is a unique experience. And that one has to be on the top of what I took from it. Was I stay composed when I didn't feel good. I didn't quit when I didn't feel good. When that race got hard, you just stuck in there. There's a lot of things I took away that, in my opinion, were far more valuable than a purse or anything like that. Most distance runners know that they don't run for money because there's not a lot of it out there. It's,
Mm.
own personal experience. The feeling you get when you finish, oh, I accomplished that. Because that's what keeps you in the long term, those type of experiences.
Yeah.
So
So, what is your calendar like, and will this change your calendar because of your win? I mean, do you run several of these a year? I went through your record, and I see you do half marathons as well. You kind of try to you kind of try to mix things up.
So a lot of times locally, luckily, because I live in Southern California, there's a race all the time year round. A lot of times I use those races as workouts and conditioning because I haven't tapered off. But sometimes it's hard to do that because you hold yourself to a standard. So when you're not running the times you want to run, it's hard. But then you say to yourself, well, you wouldn't run this quick in your own training if you're trying to use it for speed work. The half marathon for me is challenging. Even though it's half the race, I'm better at longer distances. Yeah. It's hard for me to get, more turnover for shorter periods of time. So a lot of times I'm not really a factor in these half marathons. I've hit times that were really hard for me to get, which I was happy about, but they still didn't stack up to the field. So a lot of times just use the halves as training, use it as where is my conditioning right now to go into the next race? What's the realistic pace to go at? So again, a lot of times it's just a measurement, almost like an assessment for the next race. I lately been running 2 to 3 marathons a year. I've been trying to do less to then focus more on my training to PR. When I was in my 20s or upper 20s, I was running more foolishly, just being younger. So now I kind of pick 2 or 3 a year that I enjoy to do. As I've gotten older, it's kind of switched the way that I look at racing. If you're not having fun and you're not enjoying the experience, you need to step back and reevaluate your training. Are you overtraining? Are you burning yourself out? I feel like when I was younger, I would just go all the time. And maybe that took away from my performances because I didn't kind of reevaluate and watch my volume, watch the intensity, and just be smarter about it.
Yeah. Well, when you look at your history, I think it's fair to say you're kind of a late bloomer. I mean, you're always athletic and you did well in college. But it seems like your athletic career is actually blossomed once you embraced marathon and learned how to do it. Is that typical for marathon? Like, you're in your late 30s, not to broadcast your age all over the internet, but is that typical for a marathoner to improve as they get a little bit older?
Yeah, the sport is known for having athletes that are older. I have some good friends that are in their mid 40s running amazing 2:30s, that started similar to me, started in their mid to late 30s, really excelling. It's one of those sports where I feel like some life experience is necessary to endure some of the training. When you're younger, you kind of get more distracted or, you're working on your career, other things play a role. I think when you get older, you've learned efficiency, you've learned what's important, you've learned how to listen to your body, you will listen. Whereas I think sometimes in your 20s, I'm guilty. I didn't listen to anybody. I didn't listen to anything. And I feel like maybe if I was did that more, maybe I would have excelled sooner. But I've always put in the work. That's kind of how I started running. When soccer, staying conditioning, I was a midfielder. Midfielders run up and down the field a lot. That was my advantage to getting more playing time, being more conditioned. So that's really why I got into running. And then I realized you can run your whole life. Running times, there is nothing subjective about that. No one's opinion matters on who's the better player, right? It's, did you run the time or did you not? So that's why my senior year of high school, I decided to run track instead of play soccer, because I knew, maybe I could play in college, but maybe I'd be riding the bench, whereas in running, put in the work, excel at that, and, see where you can go.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned injuries and, one thing about running, I did 5Ks for many years, and the last 2 or 3 years, the pain got too much for me. My hip would kind of hurt, my groin would kind of hurt. Sometimes my knees would hurt. Sometimes my Achilles would hurt. But it sounds like I read or listened to one of your interviews or read one of your articles written about you. And you talked about some of the pain you were having, and you looked at it as a strength thing. I guess you worked on the muscles where you're having the pain, and you dealt with the pain that way. But most people will tell you, I've passed a certain age 50, maybe you can't run anymore. Is it like a personal thing, or do you think it's if you have the right approach, the right training, maybe weights, whatever, you can run through pain?
Yeah, I think lately, maybe in the last 5 years, there's been more of a push and a component to strengthen conditioning for endurance athletes. I know back when I was in high school and in college, we strength trained, but not enough to the point I feel like to avoid injury. But I think, the culture of it is changing. Learning, triathletes will understand that. They do a lot of, non-impact work to help, their overall conditioning. It is a very specific way that you need to strength train. So it isn't counterproductive to your running, but it is vital to maintaining mechanics of running, and to maintain core strengthening so that you're not moving improperly. And so learning the muscle groups, that everyone's a little different. Everyone has a little weaker muscle groups depending how they are and what they did, growing up athletically. But I know the majority of the time it's weak hamstring and glutes that usually lead to overuse injuries, overstriding, knee pain, shin splints, you name it, usually weak glutes. So taking the time to do that, but learning, educating yourself, putting yourself in a room with people, experts that understand those things. A lot of times the running mentality for distance is more, high volume, high volume, high volume. And I learned that doesn't work for me. I can handle high volume, but I don't necessarily excel at it. And so maintaining my strength and maybe doing some non-impact cardio a couple of days out of the week, so that you can do the speed work. That's listening to your body as I've got older and understanding you don't need to run every day. Some people do and they really like to, but sometimes it's counterproductive to performance. And at the end of the day, you're injured, you can't perform. So I know personally there's chronic things that I deal with. And if I'm not stretching right, I'm not doing mobility, those things will remind you and you get back on track. But again, I think it just comes with experience, and educating yourself is a huge factor, learning the why. And as an athlete, when I learned the why, and now I understand working with other athletes, if you teach them the why, they'll have that incentive or they'll have that buy-in to want to do those things. And so again, taking ownership of your own training is really key as an athlete, not waiting for your coach to tell you to do something. They help guide you, they help program you, but learning the why and having the discipline and understanding you have to take ownership of those things in order to excel.
Yeah. Well, one thing that strikes me about you is you seem to me more muscular than what I would typically think of as a marathon runner.
Mm-hmm.
Is that more a function that running's changing and weight training is becoming more part of a runner's program, or are you more of a muscular type of runner?
I think I genetically am more of a mesomorph. Like I can build muscle mass, not saying easier than others, but I do spend a lot of time strength training. I know some of my coaches in high school knew that I spent a lot of time in the weight room. When I took electives, it was strength training. It wasn't music. So I know a lot of the coaches at Robinson knew that I spent a lot of time. I think my track coach knew that I would go into the weight room as well and was kind of like, get out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. I think I'm a little biased because I do enjoy it. And now I do a lot of that for work. But I do think it's a key factor in injury prevention. You do need to be specific according to your sport. So if you're a power athlete, you need to train specific to power energy systems. If you're an endurance athlete, you need to make sure that you're doing strengthening conditioning for more of an endurance approach. But I do think that it just helps make your body strong. I've had people say a lot of things to me, assuming I'm either a CrossFitter or I'm going to burn out in a race. A lot of them, in a competitive environment, feel like I'm going to burn out because I'm not that tall, skinny, lengthy runner. Again, I think I do surprise people because I am pretty short and muscular and my cadence is really high. So when I run next to taller runners, I probably drive them nuts because my feet are moving so quick and they have longer strides. But again, it's really, I think it just shows whatever you spend your time training in, you can adapt over time. As you get older, you just have to be more specific about it and you have to be consistent. because you do lose your fitness faster. You can be, you recover slower. So the consistency as you age is vital. Whereas I think maybe when you're younger, you could get away with not being as consistent and you wouldn't get injured.
Yeah. It's funny when you say strength in shorter strides, it sounds like almost a half marathon would be better for you, but it just goes to show you how everybody is different. How disruptive to your life is being a marathoner? I guess another way to put it is how disruptive to your marathons is life. But I remember when I used to do cycling, I was pretty serious. I mean, I was almost, basically a Cat 2 rider. You spent all my time thinking about food, what I'm going to eat. If I traveled somewhere, I worried about all my meals and getting my bike there, working on my bike. My whole life was not just riding bikes, but it's the food, it's the equipment. Is it the same way with the runner? Do you spend a lot of time on food and equipment?
So especially when you're training for a marathon, it does take I'm not into Ironmans, but I have friends that take, it takes so many hours out of your day. Training for, lower volume training, half marathons, in my opinion, is more realistic when you are working full time. Where it gets challenging for me is a lot of my job can be physical. I spend a lot of it outside, in the elements. So if I don't get a majority of my training early, I don't have the energy by the end of the day to want to go do XYZ interval training, or longer run or at a pace that I need to run. So again, over time, I've learned how to be efficient, meal prep, have my meals, bring them into work, have them accessible. Cause there's some weeks where I'm teaching classes back to back, whether it's in the classroom, outside. I'm sure teachers alone can understand that, so just learning efficiency. If you want to perform as an athlete, you need to be organized. You have to be disciplined. You learn over time. Okay, hard training done early in the morning, strength training I can do later in the day, works in the middle, knowing my workload ahead of time, being flexible with my training. Not every day, every week's going to be the same. So, I'm sure again, female distance runners that have kids, I look at it the same way. They're on their kids' schedule. They have to be flexible as well. So I think, endurance training, when it takes hours of your day and a lot of energy, I think it's so impressive when I hear women say they have kids and they're still able to, get out there and train, and some of them tend to be single moms because their spouse maybe, if they're military, they're deployed, or if they have long work days, a lot of times, it's just, the mom out there pushing the stroller. That to me is amazing. Still running those times, pushing that stroller. And then it makes me think, get it together. You're not pushing a stroller.
Yeah. Well, not to get into your personal life, but could two marathon runners be a good couple, or does one of the couple have to have a avocation that's a little bit less taxing?
It's hard for me to answer that. I think it really comes down to like organizational skills, communication. I bet two marathoners could do amazing. I found in my own personal life, I'm the runner, and I've always had better situation when they were into other things, because then you know what I mean? Like, but I think ultimately everyone's different. It just comes down to communicating and upfront. And I've dated other runners and it never worked out.
I was thinking it might be tough. I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, everyone's unique. I mean, I've met people where they said their spouse was their coach. That's next level patience right there. I couldn't do that. But, again, that's amazing to see people are able to do that. I'm not.
Yeah. I know you're a fitness instructor. Do you also coach runners too? Not necessarily just for strength, but do you coach runners on a program to improve their speed? And
yes. So the Marines I work with, their PT test is a 3 mile, which is, common to the 5K training. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times they'll come to me for programming. I'll lead track workouts twice a week that it's open to everybody, whoever wants to show up. I work a lot with their running mechanics, because personally I think you can program all you want, but if they're not running properly, they'll end up injured eventually. So it's addressing their running mechanics, their, appropriate approach to volume and intensity for running. A majority of the population I work with does not enjoy running. So being strategic about what do you like, and then fitting running in with what they like to do, is what I found to be more a productive way of trying to get them to train. Because a lot of times they just won't train and they'll just go out there and wing it. It's a lot different than working with a track team. Everyone there wants to run. So in my opinion, it's easier to program. Not that it's easy to be a coach, but at least everyone there wants to be there for the most part. When you're working with groups of people that don't like running and you're trying to encourage them, how can they be successful? Teaching them to focus on what do you like to do and how can we sprinkle some running in there so that you can be successful.
Yeah. Do you train by yourself, or do you train with other marathon runners?
So I've in the local community, sometimes I can find people to run like longer runs, but it's not as consistent, especially as we've gotten older. We all have different work schedules, family life, so it has gotten harder to find people to consistently train with. As I've gotten older, when I was younger, it was easier. But I kind of early on learned how to train on my own. Like I said, I started conditioning just to be ready for soccer. So at a young age, I would just go out for runs. I was kind of in that pace group in a college where I was, I couldn't really keep up with, I could keep up with some of the slower men. And so a lot of times I would end up training alone or trying to catch people. So again, I just learned that early on. I know there's a lot of people that run socially, like they like the social aspect of it. That's what keeps them running. And I think that's great. Whatever keeps you running. I've never been like that. Of course, I like small group training, have a friend go on a run with, but a lot of times our schedules don't match. So, it's kind of inconsistent that way.
Yeah. How did COVID affect your arc? Now, I would think probably there was probably less racing opportunities, tougher to travel as well, but lots of time to get in lots of miles. Was it helpful for your improvement?
So I know a lot of people that raced really well when there was these smaller races that were available or just after COVID. For me, I think those races, consistently racing holds you accountable to a certain standard. So that large gap in not racing wasn't really helpful for my performance. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of volume training, but I feel like I didn't do enough specific work because I didn't have anything to train for because we didn't know when we were racing again. But I know for other athletes, as soon as they were able to race again, they were hitting PRs. For me, that didn't happen. In fact, it was the opposite. I was still putting in the work, but again, I think too, that mental component, when is this going to end? What's next? Nobody really knew anything. And I know for me personally, kind of that isolation, I didn't like that. We were isolated for so long. So again, I didn't excel at it, but I do know people that did hit some PRs as soon as they were able to race again.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Robinson days. Where did you grow up?
So I lived in Burke, Virginia, but I went to Robinson, which was in Fairfax. Played travel soccer from middle school up until high school, and then played on the Robinson soccer team for 3 years. So my track and field cross country team, I was lucky enough to be in a really good program where it was super competitive. We had a large team. Like we could have had 2 varsity top 7 teams. Like we were very competitive. I know in the summer times I would kill myself and train. And we would go for time trials early on in cross country, and I would do well, stack up to everybody else, but I didn't have that genetic component to being just good. I had to put the work in. And what I found is slowly as those runners that were better than me would creep up in the season, and then I would start shifting down to 5, 6, 7 spot when maybe early on I was 2, 3, or 4. So that was always mentally something that drove me to just keep working. I always had to work hard to keep on that top 7 spot. And I think that's really what helped me learn how to put in the work. Because, if you went to a school that didn't have such a strong program, you didn't have to do the work. oh, I was on top 7, I was top 5 easily, big deal. But that struggle in high school helped kind of drive me, I think, into college, where I excelled my, sophomore, junior year. And, just knowing how to put in the work is what ultimately helped me, even today, understanding that when you understand the type of athlete you are and learning how to train specific to be successful, I think that's the key component.
Well, isn't also not that these athletes were a different level. Maybe if they offered marathon distance, maybe the way you're built, you needed more distance, and you were doing races that weren't really meant for you.
Well, 5K feels like a straight sprint to me.
Yeah.
I like it. It's challenging, and it's important to throw yourself in those races to maintain speed, right? But I do not excel at them. On the track in college, I put down some decent times in the 10K, but it still didn't stack up nationally. Again, the longer events, I feel like I do excel at, but you can't do as many of them because they are, pretty strenuous on your body.
Yeah. Who was your cross country coach at Robinson?
Jeremy Workman.
Okay. Oh yeah. So what did you learn from Coach Workman?
I learned that he had a lot, he had a big team to deal with, and he was always very positive. I think he knew he could count on me for consistency. I was the one that I feel like he knew I would always put in the work. Like, he never had to worry about me not working. In fact, he was probably like, "Can you do less? Can you work less so you're not as tired? Can you stop playing soccer?" But he had a big team, and the men's and women's team were both very large. So now that I'm a coach, looking back and understanding the amount of work it took to try to manage and have both of those teams excel was kind of, I don't think we understood it at the time, how much work that really is.
Yeah. Did you have a good experience at Robinson? Are those fond memories?
Yeah. The friends you made with track, it was a very large school, obviously, so that can be overwhelming, but the friendships and the support system you make through at least I did through the track and cross country team, helped those years be more manageable. Cause I know, the size of that school can be overwhelming sometimes, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Well, you end up in Frostburg State, which I think is a beautiful town. Why did you choose Frostburg State?
So I really enjoyed sports, but I was not I didn't excel academically early on. I did enough, but at that school in that area, you had to do extra to get into some of those bigger schools. So, when I got into college, I did great academically, but in high school, I just didn't take it serious enough to be competitive to get into some of those bigger schools. But I found Frostburg, other than the weather, was a good fit for me. And then when I started doing well, you kind of see the bright, shiny things. You're like, oh, D1, that's available to me. Go do that, and I had that opportunity. My mom got stationed in San Diego, started reaching out to coaches. I had done well nationally at cross country, so I had that on my resume, and I was able to go run D1. But like you said earlier, that wasn't the right program for me. I was just looking at all the wrong things at the age of 20 years old. Looking back, saying, you should have stayed at Frostburg. You should have finished out in D3. Looking back, D3, all those athletes are there competing because of love of the sport. You only get academic support. You don't get athletic support financially. So, and then, in running, you can go anywhere. A lot of those schools up in the Northeast, some of those smaller schools have some great athletes. And the exposure I had a much better experience on the Northeast racing than I did when I went out West Coast. And then when I didn't race for very long, I got injured, and then I didn't run for probably 4 or 5 years. So yeah, I got into other things like cycling and strength, but it doesn't carry over to running. Yeah.
So what did you think about California? Do you love it out there, or would you ever consider moving back to DC?
So when I first moved out here, I hated it. I thought it was weird. I thought everyone was weird. Everyone was on their own program. They did everything when they felt like doing it. They went to class sometimes. Like, that's the opposite mentality of the Northeast. It was go, 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 all the time. And so the transition though, over time, I think because I work with the military community, so it's not always that SoCal experience, still has that structure, still has that go, go, go feel, but then I can leave work and kind of relax. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. But you get used to the weather. That's a huge factor. I like being outside. And so now it's hard to leave. I don't see myself going back to the Northeast because I've been out here so long. So I don't plan on it. Things can always change though. But yeah, my brother still lives in DC. He's really the only family member I have that's still in that area. Most of my family's in the Midwest or Arizona.
Yeah. I saw you had a nice little rivalry with a runner from Lake Braddock and some of the local events out there. Who was that runner? And tell us a little bit about those races.
So are you referring to?
There was she's younger than you, and you guys finished together in a couple of races I was reading about. You may not have even known it. Maybe it was just reported.
I do remember. So it's been so long that you forget. And then you look back and you're like, she used to smoke me in cross country races or track races, So it was kind of fun to see the changes over time and just think about when I was younger and wish I was faster, and just, it taught me put in the work, be consistent, you can close the gap, and kind of just look at it that way, I guess. Longevity has always been important to me. I hope to continue to train and run for as long as I can. I think that's where strength comes in, that can help your longevity of saving your joints. But you never know when you're not going to be able to run again. So just staying in the present is important.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people want to run marathons, and it seems overwhelming unless you're a runner like yourself. What's your advice to people that want to run marathons?
Understand like what kind of athlete you are. Understand, if you're injury prone, doing a lower volume training, being more specific at lower volumes. Give yourself lots of time. Rest when you need to rest. Do the best to enjoy the experience. Don't do it because you think that's what you're supposed to do. You have to find some enjoyment out of it, or some of those days are going to be rough. Maybe if you just want to try it one time just to see what it's like, I know a lot of people that do that. That's good too. I always tell people, you're a runner at any distance that you run at, whether it's 5K, a mile, a marathon. Marathon doesn't make you a runner. What I think makes you a runner is, what are you consistently doing? What goals do you have? It's not, oh, you're not really a runner until you run 26 miles. I tell people, if you don't want to run 26 miles, don't run 26 miles. Pick a distance that motivates you. Pick a distance that you're like, I want to do that, and focus on that.
Yeah. If you can win one race in 2024, what race would that be?
So I'm scheduled to do the Houston Marathon. Mm-hmm. For me, winning isn't the most important part. I've been working, you work for a time standard. So in my opinion, I'd rather come in 20th, 30th with a PR than to win a race. But I will say though, winning is awesome, but hitting your own personal PRs, I think actually is more overwhelming, more emotional, because for me, I've been running for a very long time, and you're always just trying to work to your next goal, and hitting those time standards that you just won't get close to for years on end, and then it works out, and that's really emotional, because the amount of time it takes just to close a 5-second, 10-second improvement.
That's very interesting, because I don't think many athletes see it that way. I was a basketball player at Robinson, and it's always about trying to win the game. It seems to me, if I understand what you're saying, when you win an event, a little bit of that is out of your control. Who entered the event? What are the conditions? You're more worried about your own performance. So the other stuff, in some regard, is kind of noise. because you can't really control that. Is that what you're trying? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Right. Exactly. Especially a lot of times to get into certain events, you have to run a certain time. So winning an event doesn't necessarily get you into that race. Also, I mean, you put in too many hours a week. You know, the amount of times that winning a race happens is rare, but you put yourself into these races and you give yourself goals. And I think it's just more of a realistic approach to being positive and staying in racing. Because if it was only winning, that you have to have more to it than just that, in my opinion. Everyone's got their different opinion, and it's sports specific, obviously. But marathon is such a long race, and anybody who runs it knows that even you can be in the best shape of your life and one thing is off and you're done. Your nutrition's off. Oh, you have a stomach virus. Oh, the weather's bad. Or you have a mental break, mental funk, even though you're conditioned. There's so many outside factors that play a role in your overall performance, which humbles you, is that even though you can step on that line feeling you're in the best shape of your life, sometimes it just doesn't work out,
Yeah. Well, last question, Bonnie, and this has been great to meet you. If you had to, if there's one person who is your most important mentor towards running, or coach, or maybe a role model, someone that you've never met, who would that person be?
So my college coach at Frostburg, I think I learned the most from, because he understood the type of runner I was and program specific to that, and I saw myself excel because of that. He's no longer the coach there anymore, and they in fact went D2. But I think I learned the most from him. I learned that you don't need to run hard every day. You do need to put consistent work in. The volume is important. And he understood his long volume, long runners. He understood his shorter. And as a coach, I mean, that's so vital, even though it sounds very basic. That's not always the case when you're an athlete in college, having that be so specific, understanding your athletes. So I learned that as being a coach now, and I learned that as being an athlete as well. And so that probably had the most profound effect on me in performance and then coaching as well.
Yeah. Well, look, Bonnie, again, this has been great. You're such an inspiration, making us Robinson Rams proud, look good. Hopefully next year, if you defend your crown, maybe I'll come. Definitely not going to run, but maybe I'll come cheer you on. Maybe we could bring some supporters, even though it sounds like you had plenty. But it's been really nice talking to you, and very nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for reaching out. I feel very honored that you wanted to speak with me. So it's my pleasure to speak with you and talk on. I could talk about running all day, training all day. So
well, maybe at some point you can come on again after your next success, and we can catch up again.
I do want to run the Army 10 miler. That's on my bucket list, and the Cherry Blossom Festival.
Those are both DC area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to come out for those. I just haven't. I don't have an excuse.
Yeah. Well, if you do, please give us some notice. I'd love to meet you in person and support you in those events.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, again, I really enjoyed talking to you, Bonnie, and best of luck for the rest of the season. I guess you're probably winding down now, but best of luck in 2024.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Bonnie. Take care.
Bye.